Well, hi, everyone. This is Deidre Kindred, your nurse advocate, educator, and navigator on Health Chats Among Friends. So welcome, everyone. We're going to have an awesome chat tonight. I have Cheryce Moss here with Blessings Funeral Home, and we're going to be discussing a topic nobody likes to talk about, but it's a must because we all will face this topic sooner or later. So Cheryce, say hi to everyone. So Cheryce, tell us a little bit about yourself. Yay! So tell us a little bit about yourself.
As of right now, I'm currently the location leader of Blessing Funeral Home that's located in Mansfield, Texas. I've been in the industry since I was 19 years old. Of course, I'm coming up on my 13th
What are you,
year.
20? You look like you're 20.
I'm in my 30s. I just have a baby face. I kind of, people always ask me how I got into this, and I call it my blessing while walking my dog. Just to give you kind of like a brief short story. I was walking my mother's dog, and I saw who would then become my mentor. She was at our neighbor's house, and she had a really pretty purple suit on. I said, man, she has a really pretty purple suit on. And so my mother lives in a neighborhood where, like, when you see one neighbor, how everybody else got to come out and have a conversation. And we all came out and we started talking. And one of the neighbors asked her, was she hiring? She said, yeah, I'm actually looking for an administrative assistant. And at the time I was in college going to school to be a teacher and things like that. And I said, I'll do it. And she's like, you're nothing but a baby. And I'm like, I just turned 19. So I fell into it. I started being an administrative assistant at Guardian Funeral Home located in Fort Worth. And I started, and I fell in love with it. Just the aspect of it, helping people, it was just something that just came on to me. And I was like, you know what, I really think that I can do this. And I've been doing it ever since, and I haven't looked back. So it's just one of those things where I found my niche at a very young age. A lot of people don't do that at a very young age, but I've stuck with it. I've become successful at it. I feel like at my age, I've accomplished a lot, actually. And it's just one of those things where I love what I do.
Oh, that is awesome. I think that's awesome because your whole story being so young, because when I was 19, and some people still haven't found their purpose or their passion. And so for you to be able to find it at such a young age, that's a blessing. And you happen to be working for Blessing Funeral Home.
Yeah.
So tell me, oh my goodness, I have so many questions. So tell me a time, like when you first started, were you nervous? Were you kind of like,
I was very nervous because the day she set up my interview, I'm driving up, and the address kind of gave me a school. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a school. This is going to be my dream. I want to be a teacher. And I call her and I say, hey, I'm out front. Is it okay if I come in? And she's like, I don't see you out front. And I'm like, yeah, I'm right here. I'm in front of the school. She said, oh no, we're at the funeral home behind you. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I come out, and she comes and she greets me, and we go in and we have the interview. And the whole entire time I am like nervous. Like, I'm like, I am truly in a funeral home. Like, what am I doing here? And just the all around being around the business, it took me a long time to be able to go in the back of the funeral home. So I made sure I stayed in the front where the administrative things need to be done, but it took me a minute. And the funeral director that was working there at that time, she kind of helped ease me into it. And then of course, after I, started to ease into it and go back there, it just became natural. So in the beginning, it was more of a nervous feeling because of course it's something that you've never been through before. You're like, ooh, but after that initial like nervousness, I kind of really got over it and just kind of fell in love with the industry.
Right. I mean, because wow, you guys deal with so much family dynamics.
Oh yeah.
I know you have some stories, as a nurse. It ends for me once they left the hospital, right?
Right.
Or being on that other side, when my mother passed away, being on that other side of the fence where you're the family member and you're the one having to navigate that time where it's just so stressful and emotional. And how do you guys do it? How do you keep your sanity?
It's we were really, me and my staff were just joking about this earlier today. It's a switch. We have to, you have to have the personality that fits the room, and that is difficult at times because these are people that you've never met before.
Right.
And then you end up either building a beautiful bond with them, or or it's kind of an okay feeling because my running joke is, who really wants to be at a funeral home? I don't even want to be here some days. So you try to make the process as smooth and as comfortable as you possibly can, because you do know that they're there and they've lost someone that is very important to them. And you are there to help honor their loved ones like the best way you possibly can.
Absolutely. And to me, that's what it's all about, because then you get different personalities within the family, because you can kind of tell, who's handling it okay. And everybody's at a different stage too, So I know you've seen this. So from your side of the fence, does it ever just kind of like hit you?
Oh, of course. Yes, ma'am. Different scenarios, different situations. Of course, how the person passes away hits you, especially if the individual was young. I've had to deal with families where their loved one was my age, and I'm like, whoa, like that's a hard situation to be in. And I had a family one time that I just literally said the first 15 minutes, we just sat there and I just held the mom's hand. That's all I could do. And at the very end of it all, I didn't say anything. I handed her some tissues and I let her take a moment. And after about 15 minutes, she's like, okay, I can do this. And at the very end, it was like, she was like, I'm glad you did that for me. Like, I didn't feel rushed. I just felt like you were literally just there for me. And families can, I wish families can understand it, that we really are there for you. For people to be in this type of profession, it's definitely a servant's heart to be there for someone that you do not know, but you know that they're hurting.
Yeah, it's definitely a ministry and a calling. Yeah. Because I feel like God called you right then and there, and you had the courage to listen and follow through with that. Some folks, it took them a while. I don't mention no names,
so I definitely get it. I definitely get it.
So, wow, so much I want to say to you too. So emotionally, how do you handle your emotions? Because I know it's hard, being always on spot for somebody else. So how do you self-care for you?
That's a very interesting question, and I've learned a lot more here the past 2 years, especially with the wonderful pandemic that we've had. A little bit more about me that I didn't include in my bio. I was one of the funeral directors who went to New York when COVID first started jumping off, and New York was pretty much the hot spot out of any state. And so after that, going over there, listening to those stories, and then coming back, being put in quarantine, trying not to go crazy myself, because, you take someone who has been, working this entire time, and then you sit them home for 2 weeks, so I couldn't leave. And it was one of those things where I quickly found out that jail was not for me, because I need to be able to come and go. But, when it comes to self-care, we just had a roundtable about this at our Emerging Leaders Conference we just had in October. And to hear some of the funeral directors on how they feel from the high case values to
Mm.
being able to not, as funeral professions, we are trained to where we meet the family's tradition, no matter what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And to know that majority of all the traditions that people were used to,
Mm.
they couldn't do it anymore. And so
Right.
you had to kind of create unique ways in order for people to be able to at least be able to say, okay, we did this in the midst of a pandemic, but I think this was okay for mom or dad. So when it comes to self-care, I do encourage, especially my staff, especially me, hey, do take your days off. I do know some funeral directors, we have doctor's hours. We really do. We work sun up, sundown, phones always on. Of course, if you're helping a family out, and of course it's after hours and the family has questions, that either emailing you or they're calling you, that there's no nonstop until the disposition has taken place. And even after that, if you build a good enough relationship with them, they will still reach out to you and just ask questions. And if I know the answer, I'll give it to them. If I don't, then I'll find somebody else that can help them out. But when it comes to self-care, we really try to encourage, take your days off, put your phone on your nightstand, don't touch it. That's very hard for me. I'm literally glued to my email address. But here lately, I've said, you know what? I'm gonna take a couple hours on my off day and not look at emails. And I have a wonderful team that allows me, if it is my day off, to be like, you know what? I'm not gonna bother her. As long as the building ain't on fire, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. So, tell me, if you can, tell me about one of the stories that you had to create. I mean, because COVID was something else. Did you guys have to do different precautions to prepare the body?
There was different precautions on how to prepare the body. Definitely, because nobody knew what this virus was doing while that person was not living. Everybody was kind of at a like, well, what do we do?
Alive? Is it still, what is it, dormant? Is it not? Yeah.
Right. And so there were major precautions. It seemed like the rules and regulations were changing like constantly. Like we would get an email about something. Okay, we're gonna go this way, and by tomorrow it's changed to something else. I mean, it was the same way with the counties changing too. But preparation, how many people can attend the funerals? At one point in time, it got to be 10 people could only attend the funeral, when you used to having like 100+ people at a funeral. I can still remember the last funeral. I can still remember the last funeral I did before COVID, that it was at full-blown capacity. We were at a big Catholic church in downtown Fort Worth, and it was at full capacity. And that was the last one. And I was like, wow, like if I'd have knew that would have been my last one, like, yeesh.
Right.
But definitely changes to our precautions in coming inside of the building. We were doing Zoom calls and trying to find different ways to have arrangement conferences with families, especially with families who are like, no, I'm not going anywhere. We can't do this over the computer. The funeral professions really had to dig deep to be able to create value during the pandemic. Because
you're on mute.
Oh, can you hear me?
That's okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
No.
We had to find a way to bring value into the funeral services, because we all know someone passed away. Okay, we finna go to the funeral home and make arrangements, and we're gonna be there for a minute, and that's it. And to try to build value in, hey, we're going to have to do this over the computer. Hey, only so many can go inside the room. Hey, only so many can go and be out at the graveside service. Only so many can be in the chapel. There, it was crazy.
And that's such a hard thing too for you guys, because you don't want to be the bad guy, but you have to be the bad guy for the safety of others. And I've had that happen in my profession as well. It's just like, oh, I really don't want to have to tell them that some of them have to leave, or some of them have to go into a different room, or some of them can't come in. And knowing that that's their last time they're going to see the loved one, I bet you guys were super, super overwhelmed with how did you cope? My heart goes out to you.
It's one of those things where we really just have to take it one day at a time. And, I can distinctly remember a situation where, I had a family, a 21-year-old girl passed away due to a car accident, not COVID, not anything. And she passed away in the midst of the same week that everything was shutting down. And to have to sit up and tell her parents that you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't, anything that you believed as a tradition, we can't do it. And only 10 people were able to be out at her graveside, services. But there were a lot of people that had to stand so far back. There were so many people out in that cemetery for her services. And that's one of the funeral services that really kind of broke me down, because I was like, who am I to tell this family what they can and can't do for their 21-year-old child?
Right. Oh, I just can't imagine. So, did you guys have to like beef up your staff and just kind of just around the clock doing when peak, in the pandemic?
Well, what the interesting thing about me was that I was in New York at the peak of it here in Texas. So I left probably about the middle of April. And that's when everything, and then when I was in quarantine, that's when Texas like opened back up. And I was like, whoa, this is going to be different. In New York, it was a lot. I can only give you my New York experience, because I really wasn't here to experience it in the Texas part. But in New York, it was so different. I had never been to New York, so they sent me to a state that I had never been to before. So I didn't know really what to expect. I would expect that the airport would be full, but it was completely empty. And then, of course, getting there, grocery stores, like the whole mask, and like you had to wear a mask. You could not come into a store without a mask on.
Right.
There were some restaurants that wasn't open. I don't eat meat, so it was very hard for me to find, places, for me to, be able to eat. And luckily, the lady that I was under at her funeral home, her husband owned a deli, and so I was able to get, some things from there. But yeah, it was definitely a scary time.
Right.
I never experienced anything like that before, and people be, how was it? And I say it's something that I would never wish on anybody. I tell some of the funeral directors here, I was like, when Texas became the next hot spot, I was like, you guys haven't seen busy. You guys have not seen busy from what I saw. You're talking about round the clock, always up, always going to phones, always ringing from the time we unforward them to the end of the day, and they're still ringing at the end of the day. It was just a pretty bad situation on that side of the world.
Oh, well, yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. So this is such an interesting chat, because always talking about the land of the living and active and things like that. But then when it comes to, talking about this topic, because we're all going to have to face this situation sometime sooner or later. So that's exactly why I wanted you here, because I wanted people to hear your aspect, because you're a human being.
Yes, ma'am.
And the human aspect of touch. So tell me a little bit, walk me through, without COVID, walk me through how you guys care for a client.
Well, first and foremost, there is something that is called an initial call. So if your loved one passes away at like a hospital, or if they're at their residence and they're under hospice or something of that nature, someone of authority has to give us a call. Whether it's a nurse, coroner's office, police officer, someone of authority has to give us a call. And then, of course, once that call is made, we come and receive your loved one into our care. And then, of course, once we have that loved one into our care, this is when we start the process of the planning. The family comes in, we make the arrangements, talk about dates and times, what they would like to have happen, things of that nature. Think questions of, whether you want burial or cremation. If you're trying to go cremation, are you trying to have a service before the person is cremated, or do you want them present at the service? Do you want embalming? Do you not want embalming? Things of that nature. Those are the type of conversations that we try to have before we have the conference. But if it has to wait into the conference, because there are families, I have met families to this day that when someone passes away, no one knows what to do. It's one of those things where, for me, I take it as a teaching moment. I take it as an education moment, because, okay, you don't know what to do. Let me take you by your hand and I'm show you every step on what it is that we offer. I know mom wanted to be buried. Okay, cool. Did mom have a cemetery plot? Oh, I don't know. Or, okay, so that's the first thing we need to check up on, to see if she had a cemetery plot. There are people that really just do not know which way to go. So once we kind of get narrowed down what they're really wanting to do, or how they envision of honoring their loved one, the rest just kind of goes on from there. Of course, the preparation of the loved one, depending on which disposition that they choose. And then, of course, following through with everything that the next of kin wants to happen.
Right. Because I'm quite sure I attended a course. I'm quite sure you guys get them all the time. So many people have different cultures, have different traditions. So are you guys back to, since COVID is kind of waning, but it's getting ready to go back up. But anyway, since you guys have people who have different backgrounds, different cultures, I'm quite sure you have to have courses to be well versed in.
Yes,
the
ma'am.
Jewish
Yes,
culture
ma'am.
does this, and they expect this, and so on and so forth.
You have to be very well versed. I love serving different cultures. It kind of makes my day a little bit more interesting, because I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not going Baptist, I'm going Catholic today, or I'm not going Catholic, I'm going Buddhist today, or I'm not being Buddhist, I'm going Jewish today. So it makes my day a little bit more exciting, because you're just not doing the same thing over and over. And I tell people, being in the funeral profession, it's never the same thing. The outcome is different. The outcome is always the same, whether it's burial or cremation, but the families, they make it worthwhile.
I bet. Oh goodness. So if someone wanted to, this has been amazing. And I really thank you. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you to find out more about Blessing Funeral Home, what is the best mode of contact, or modes of contact, that they can reach you?
Just give me a call at the funeral home at 817-473-1555. I'm located in Mansfield, Texas. So I'm normally pretty much there. That's like my home away from home. So just reach out to me at the funeral home, and myself, or any of my team members will be able to assist.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Cheryce. This has been awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, yes, and I would love to have you back, sometime in the future, maybe, later on this year.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you everyone for tuning in to Health Chats Among Friends, where we bring you reputable resources from our local communities. My name is Deidre Kindred. I'm a nurse advocate, educator, and navigator, and we love helping families and their loved ones have adequate resources. Thank you, and tune in next week for another amazing chat. Bye.